How often do we notice things around us? How can we be more observant, curious to our surroundings? And how can it help us improve our acting creativity muscle? In her book Conscious Creativity, Philippa Stanton reveals the ways to spark our creative nature and bring it back to life. Let's be honest, we can all feel a little blocked every now and again, and with a little bit of exercise and practice we can unlock that channel that we once had as kids and let it unfurl and release. Yes, a trip to a gallery or theatrical play can give us a moment of indulgence, but the simple key to any creative inspiration lies in consciously taking the time to accurately acknowledge what is around us. Being creative and curious is a fundamental part of being an artist, a creator, an actor. We are all hardwired to invent, explore, and experiment. As babies, creativity was our default setting, and in our early development we all have used our senses and instincts to survive and learn without the hindrance of intellectual analysis. Being creative isn't specifically about tuning into our inner child, but to observe the world around us with a level of interest akin to that of a child. Like any other discipline across the board, creativity is something that needs to be practiced and exercised. Even if we feel chaotic, underprepared and unproductive at first, experimentation and questing are never wasted, and we all need to practice. Doing things we don't want to do or don't like will often prove far more productive than constant focusing on the things we find easy. The great thing about creativity is that pushing boundaries is so accessible and solutions are infinite. In the long term, it will be the departure from the structure that would lead us to a deeper development of our own creative practice. The time will come when we allow ourselves to veer off plan, step away from our safe zone, and totally engage with our burgeoning curiosity. So, what follows are a handful of ways to be aware of when it comes to being a creative artist. Firstly, boredom is a great way to nurture our motivation and some of our best creative sparks. It may seem counterintuitive to set ourselves tasks of being bored, but it's quite the opposite. When spending time in limbo while waiting before something happens, whether it's for a bus, in a doctor's room, in a traffic jam, rather than reaching for our phones, let's resist the urge and focus on our boredom and engage our senses. Some exercises we can do while waiting somewhere is to count how many things we can see around us of just one color, to listen to different sounds, identifying different smells, or even looking at other people, strangers, and trying to figure out their life stories. Next, comparison is something to avoid since it makes us doubt our own abilities and it's time consuming while depletes our drive, muddles our inspiration and evaporates any confidence we felt was important to say or do. It is vital to acknowledge at the start of any creative process that this feeling is unfortunately an inevitability, but it is universal and perfectly normal. When we feel the approaching urge to compare ourselves to other actors, let's say, whether in an audition or even on screen, we need to be ready to turn the feeling on its head. We must cultivate our own honest identity. Every year thousands of cookbooks come out and many of them include exactly the same recipes. But it's not the recipes that define the content, it is the personalities behind them, the unique voices and experiences. We are all unique and distinctive and therefore have our own voice to cultivate and nurture. Then there's fear and insecurity of getting it wrong, which is something that we all have felt before. These feelings can't be totally dispelled, so we have to cultivate an inner mantra of it doesn't matter, even if we don't quite believe it. Worrying that we're going to get something wrong implies that there must be a correct way of doing something that we are unaware of. That somewhere someone knows what this right way is and they're just waiting to see whether we do too and will probably laugh at us if we don't. A casting director may have an inkling of what to expect from an actor's performance, but the execution of it may be completely different to what they expected. This doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, since it's all subjective. The fear of getting it wrong, getting rejected and feeling like a failure is not something anyone wishes to bring on and embrace, but it's one of the realities of creative progression that we have to accept. Setting out with excitement, inspiration, hope and expectation is absolutely how it should be, and to remind ourselves that often fear is just excitement and adrenaline in disguise. Burnout can happen because we've been creating lots of work, often with great purpose and possibly huge responsibility. The creativity becomes heavy, mistakes even heavier, and any initial sense of the happy accident, lightness and flow completely disappears. This is the time to let ourselves off the hook and not be productive. During this period, it's important to make small changes to our routine and maybe invent new habits. It's the ideal time to make trips to museums, galleries, watch plays and films with no purpose other than looking at lots of different things. We need to feed ourselves at this point with interesting information that our brain can later connect to lots of creative ideas or thoughts, perhaps even for a character we're looking to create for our repertoire. Documenting is also a great way to practice and take time to consciously collect and document often small observations from our daily experiences that aren't necessarily always pretty, but which interest us. We will all approach documenting in our own unique way, and it is really important to do something every day, no matter how small, even if it's a new thought or something we've seen in a new light, to make a note of it. We can have a physical sketchbook, notebook, diary for instance, to help collect thoughts, sketches, notes, photos, magazine cuttings, postcards and even bits and pieces we've picked up that we just like for some reason. It's a useful exercise to regularly look back over all our experiments, notes and ideas so that they stay fresh in our mind and firmly rooted. It is often surprising when one can look back through the old notebook and how a rather insignificant idea 2 years previously suddenly is incredibly relevant. Exercise is to decide to go for half-hour walks without our smartphones or camera and look at everything around us and take notice of how we feel about our surroundings. Is the area familiar, boring, beautiful, ugly, ordinary, functional, colourful, dull, dirty or clean? While we're walking, let's think about the reasons we like the area and be conscious of our feet on the ground and the ground under our feet. Let's become aware of all our senses working and have the same openness and interest that a child would have. Then we'll go back to the same walk on another day with our camera and allow ourselves to take pictures of anything that interests us, a combination of new different things and things we saw and felt on the first walk. We can also bring home 5 things we found on our second walk, anything from a pebble to a rubber band to a leaf or even a flower. These 5 things we'll keep in our home for several days and consciously look at them every day and find new things to see. Watching how they change and how our attitude towards them change over the course of the week, we can organize our observations into a weekly record. We are mostly bombarded with images of beauty and perfection, but it is the images of real life and subtle imperfections that will always resonate with us more deeply. Spending time with something not conventionally beautiful but run down instead, maybe even that we consider ugly, can be incredibly enlightening, aesthetically exciting and inspiring. All these exercises and practices can help us become a more creative, well-rounded being, so that when we eventually go to an audition, step onto stage or in front of the camera, our character should always have a secret we have invented, one that isn't in the script and one that has not been displayed or divulged to anyone at any time. This means our character will always have atmosphere, life beyond the stage, the screen, beyond the play or the script itself, and this will make the performance unique. Creating small secret stories that only we know and which sit silently in the space between the viewer and ourselves is our aim. Atmosphere is the untold story we can all create from the space a story rests in, and it will often be the defining element that makes our work unique. We gain a sense of how an artist perceives the world from the atmosphere they choose to share with us. To soak up an atmosphere is to be present and aware of something wider than the details of the subject we are focusing on. It can be influenced by color, light and shadow, touch and sound, even smell and taste. The idea is to find our own rhythm and work our creativity muscle, which will eventually lead us towards different avenues and places that we haven't come across, and rediscover our true character.